Why us? This is a question that I get sometimes, a core and powerful question that can explain so much about our current state as a species. This question asks, why us? Why is it that we are plagued by the Archon? Why did it come here? Why were we destined in a way to face such a challenge? This is a difficult, nuanced problem to answer simply. There are many operating principles that relate to why the Archon came to this earth and why we find ourselves in the position that we are in. In order to understand all of this in fine detail, including what this means for us as an evolutionary process and how to escape this archonic weight, moreover, how to benefit from it and escape the gravity and the life and death cycle of this planet, which is the greatest task possible for us, I do recommend the trilogy of course books, the Magnum Opus, The Way of the Projectionist, and The Way of the Death Defier, where I discuss in much more detail all the history, knowledge, and the techniques needed in order to escape and even thrive within the current archonic tide. I will leave a link to this trilogy in the video description below. There you will find step-by-step answers and solutions. But in this video I would like to take a slightly different perspective in some ways and discuss different distinctions, ones that are more mainstream at the moment, and in doing so, give you more food for thought, because in discussing and in presenting an inner alchemist's perspective on these current notions, I can clearly and through some comparison, share many secrets with you that are not often, if ever, discussed by those seriously trying to understand the true nature of the human condition and human history. In doing so I want to give a slightly different idea as to why us, and why a thing like the Archon would migrate or establish itself, move itself and its intent, in this direction. In other words, I want to discuss modern world ideas about current human history and give an inner alchemist's opinion which I feel will reveal some interesting things that may be useful to you in your quest for greater individual expansion. To begin, we can say that there are a number of different answers, theories, and possibilities that have been offered over the years by those researchers that have looked into the unexplained weirdness of the world, by those that can perceive in one way or another that the world is just far more complicated and abstract than the average rational skeptic might imagine. A common theory, for example, which I want to explore in this video and use as a stepping-off point to reveal new secrets about inner alchemy, posits that the planet has been visited and tampered with in the past for mineral resource and slave labor, or a desire by those visitors to somehow help humanity. That extraterrestrials or intraterrestrials, if you believe in transdimensional beings, but most often quite physical aliens, came here to visit and perhaps even exploit humanity, and it is that visitation by quite physical ancient aliens that is the reason and the answer for all of the strangeness of the human world. While I might take a more energetic approach, and speak of things in a harder to grasp perhaps way as I describe energies, currents, and transdimensional titans, there are those that have taken a more physical perspective and used that perceptive point of view to try to answer the question of, why us? Why here? Why the odd human history with strange ancient manuscripts, lost technologies, and unexplainable civilizations and megastructures? Often, for example, some researchers into the paranormal aspects of our past history and current mental divisions might try to explain these by connecting current odd sightings of strange UFOs and other kinds of seemingly impossible to explain phenomena, and past ancient human history where there seems to be an ever-increasing amount of odd evidence to show that our past, our distant past, was full of things that do not make sense, that even seem to imply in the most extreme case, that ancient humans were actually far more advanced technologically and spiritually than modern humanity. Now, I am not trying to debate or say that certain things did not happen, that ancient aliens, for example, are not real, or try to negate them by saying that somehow what inner alchemists believe is the only truth, but I want to explore such mysteries from an inner alchemist's point of view, and in doing so give another possibility to try to explain the nature of such alien life, and provide a little more information on the nature of the human species and its potential in accordance to other possibilities, and in this way point out that humanity is perhaps not just a one-time wonder as it were, but instead a cyclical species with many ups and downs that have in this cyclical way left behind such a host of physical and other kinds of evidence that the sheer complexity of it far exceeds a purely physical and common for the times, three-dimensional and purely classical physics kind of approach. I can start by saying that some of the terminology used by these ancient peoples, symbols, and words used to describe aspects of how their past world came to be, might not be purely psychological, a kind of unreal myth, as typical highly rational archaeologists and scientists believe it to be, and it might not be a purely physical thing either, as many modern researchers might imagine it to be either, but that it might be a nuanced intermingling that takes into account a far deeper insight into the nature of reality, by incorporating multidimensional perceptions, true non-physical forces, and a deeper understanding of how it is that the mind, thoughts, can and are things. A deeper knowing that takes it as fact that inner dimensions are real, that they affect matter. So, to dismiss this written history as just so much ancient mythology, or even just physical only, physical ancient aliens only for example, is just utterly wrong and simple from an inner alchemist's point of view. And to assume that you are being more intelligent than those ancient civilizations by referring to what they called gods as ancient aliens, is just a degradation of modern understanding, not an evolution by modern humanity as is almost always believed by recent researchers who are trying to study and decipher the clues from the ancient past. To call what these past people referred to as gods, physical ancient aliens only, is in and of itself a kind of degradation in understanding of the true nature of reality by the modern human, as opposed to a greater understanding, as is believed by current people, being that they can sometimes come to conclusions that make them think that truly ancient and now lost cultures were somehow less aware or more naive than the great modern rational conceptions by contemporary humans. This is of course a deadly mistake, because it is the current world, being that it is so utterly lost in physicality only, that has degraded in understanding the true nature of reality. At least this is what inner alchemists believe. It is of course completely legitimate to study all the physical aspects of ancient archaeology, what might be termed alien contact, and even alien tampering with past and even current humanity, but in trying to truly understand alien things, we must be at least willing to let go of purely physical interpretations, because it may be the case that those alien beings, past alien civilizations, or even the alien titans that I have discussed, might at the very least have the possibility of existing and manipulating within dimensional fields that we cannot consider to be physical at all. From a physical point of view only, I think that there are many people that are coming around to the understanding that there is no possibility that we are alone in this fabulously gigantic cosmos. That no matter what some skeptic might dogmatically believe according to skeptic reasoning, the size of this universe, even the physically measured section of it, is so vast and so large, so complex in its potential, that even using the most sober estimates, such as really conservative numbers for and within the Drake equation for example, that tries to give a general and simple formula to try to discover the number of technologically advanced civilizations out there, there has to be little doubt that we are not the only sentient and aware species in the universe, but that there might be more than we may suspect. And even though the Drake equation is often used just for technologically advanced other planetary races, there is no reason why we cannot add to this by saying that technology has the possibility of not just being physical and mechanically based, but that it could also be a kind of energetic one or a mental technology, and that there are understood to be, even within the highly limited understanding of the modern times, other dimensions accessible, other dimensions possible, for other potentially highly advanced alien civilizations to be able to inhabit and manipulate within. But why us? Why here? Why would such a possible species, using Drake's equation with optimistic figures, come here, to see, help, or exploit us? The reason as to why us could be explained and has been explained by a number of theorists and researchers already, but again, most often using only physical and three-dimensionally bound conceptions. This work is quite elaborate and incredibly valid, and can truly help us understand the general reasoning for all of this extreme mystery when it comes to the human race, and some of the impossible archaeological finds that are increasing in number, that do point to a lost history, a lost human past. But from an inner alchemist's point of view, certain much-needed nuance can be brought to bear, and this can help us understand even more, because through such extended perceptions, there are other possibilities that could be considered as well, possibilities that are just as valid in my opinion, and possibilities that perhaps you might be interested in because they can fill in some of the gaps that are lacking from a purely physical point of view. Again, I am not trying to debate certain issues, but I feel that there is also the possibility of discussing the inner alchemist's perspective, and in doing so give another perception that might be considered valid and worth pursuing by certain researchers, by those interested in certain possibilities that go beyond just the objective, that is purely object-based reality and rationality, to include other potentials having to do with energy, energetic reality, which is the basis of inner alchemy. As I have explained in other videos, inner alchemists strive to master a form of perception that could be called seeing, which is the ability to see energy directly as it flows across the cosmos. To them, this ability to see energy directly is the greatest perceptual ability possible for a person, the only way to truly see the underlying fundamental principles of all creation, and through that seeing, new possibilities can be witnessed that go beyond all dogma and all of the limitations that the purely physical senses impose on average humanity. For example, by understanding the inner alchemist's point of perception, which may be somewhat similar to what other occult traditions might have to say about the limitations of not being able to see the inner aspects of things, that also suggest that reality is not just so many solid objects all interacting in three-dimensional space only. One can begin to come to terms with a new kind of possibility, one that posits that there is an underlying energetic basis to reality, and that this is the final denominator to true perception, at least in accordance to what is possible for human beings, and that by understanding that inner energetic perceptive point, something which may be referred to as seeing, as I have said, we may perceive greater complexity and begin a finer understanding of those things that are highly important in discovering what aliens may be, who we truly are, where we came from, and where we are going. If we look into those theories on ancient aliens, for example, we may ask ourselves, why did they come here? Some who believe that these ancient aliens created or modified us, that they genetically tampered with us, giving us an expanded human self-aware consciousness that took us from primitives to civilization and sentient self-awareness, might ask themselves from that theory's perspective, why did they do this, interact with us at all? And in accordance with them, those aliens came here because they, in accordance with their interpretations of ancient texts, came here to take something from the planet, like precious metals, and or because they wanted to use humanity as labor, or to help humanity to evolve beyond the animal, perhaps for one physical reason or another. Well, right off, if you are familiar with my material, you might notice that there is great similarity between these theories of ancient civilizations and physical aliens, and what I have mentioned in relation to that titan I call the Archon, or what similar occult traditions might call by other names, such as the Gnostic demiurge, for example, or Yaldabaoth, which is another Gnostic name for the simple god of those stuck in only the object-based three-dimensional world. What I mean by this is that if you examine these theories of the Archon or the demiurge and compare those to the theories of ancient aliens, for example, there is a lot of similarity here. There is a lot of reciprocal general notion when it comes to certain beliefs about acting forces and what happened to humanity. And the only real difference seems to be that one seems to need to explore these possibilities of an ancient conquering force from a purely object-based reality perspective. That is, they need to have a physical alien, a three-dimensional perceivable and actionable object traveling and acting in three-dimensional space, while I or people that speak similar things to what I say, tend to take a more ethereal, that is energetic or multidimensional approach. While believers in purely physical ancient aliens may need to, must, only think in terms of physicality because they cannot see, inner alchemist can go beyond this, and even though it must be admitted that we humans on the whole seem to at the moment be stuck in the prison of three dimensions, not being able to see or clearly conceive of the possibility of a multidimensional existence beyond the great gravity of physicality, inner alchemists through their relentless focus have maintained their ability to see, and they can see that our true origins are from an inner source, a spiritual source as it were, energetic, multidimensional, and all true answers need to be found there. That is, according to inner alchemists, what we are is spirit first and then matter, and not just matter, or just matter that invented or thereafter in some way created spirit. Or what the modern world might term the mind or the psyche, as is the notion of the modern times, of puffers, those that can only perceive the world as a three-dimensional thing for the most part and nothing more. But inner alchemists, for example, believe that our roots, our true essence starts from the inside, and it is this inner essence that then pushes itself outward into its heaviest dimensional form of us, which is physicality. And further, they can see that it is an archonic sickness to be stuck in only the physical realm, that this clouding by the Archon is brutal, severe, costly, and that the only answer as to why us then needs to be discovered by understanding that inner reality first, because without that understanding of the true energetic essence and foundation of all outer things, nothing will ever be uncovered. Moreover, all outer physical symbols will not only limit the perception of the greater truths to be found in inner reality, but they will actually cloud and imprison those seeking answers, because physicality will never show the whole and clear picture, being that it is in essence the lowest form of manifestation and therefore the least precise, the least information-full. The inner creates the outer. Civilizations long lost through history and time, and ancient aliens traveling across vast oceans of space, are outer manifestations and indeed to some degree outer symbols. If you understand that all physical objects are just symbols for an inner essence, then these potential objects such as ancient civilizations and ancient aliens are comparable to massive and complex outer physical symbols of a greater inner reality. And that to understand the nature of the modern human we must begin with a great dark cloud, a sentient legion I refer to as the Archon, the ruler of this corner of a certain dimensional range called physicality, the great creator and ruler of the gravity of that physicality. But if we begin from an object-based reality only, even from there we can say that, being that the general understanding of human history is such that most of the world believes that there is a very small timeline for humanity, that is, most people believe that human beings have only been around for a few 100,000 years at most, that humans were primitive hunter-gatherers throughout most of this past time, then it becomes somewhat challenging in accordance with those now accepted beliefs by mainstream science, to explain a great deal of our past. For that reason, it is perhaps sometimes easier to explain such a notion of the odd incongruences of the human past by trying to neatly fit it into such limited conceptions of time and human existence, ideas that posit that humanity could not possibly advance, that it could not possibly create such megastructures and wonder, unless something radical happened, and that this radical happening could only have taken place during this small window of the accepted human timeline. Because before this humanity did not exist and there is no physical evidence adequate enough for the modern person to believe anything but the fact that humanity is a young race that has just stepped out of the jungle. The modern world cannot account for multiple universes or even cycles of existence that have brought humanity and indeed the whole of the earth from one dimensional position to another, and from one form of being to another, as it is buffeted and bathed by what could be called positive and negative currents, with the Archon being, at least from a certain human point of view, a negative current that positions our contemporary world in a dimensional frequency that we call physicality and the bounding walls, the prison, of 3 dimensions. Life, in other words, at least according to the seeing of inner alchemists, is far more complex than neat postulates that either stick with the main beliefs of modern science and posit that humanity is young, one of a kind, or other equally 3-dimensionally bound theories that might be more open to other life but still just as rational and physically based in a foundational way, posit that ancient aliens, physical aliens only, of a most likely very humanoid variety, must be the only thing that could possibly bring such a change in the species. Nothing but physicality will do for some, even by some that are willing to look beyond the accepted mainstream beliefs to a degree. Given the notion that humanity is this incredibly young species, a few 100,000 years at most, ancient aliens then become this odd kind of mixing of notions, some of which are accepted by the rational mainstream while other aspects are not. Yes, human beings seem to have become sentient awfully fast, and once this happened civilization seems to have sprung up overnight in historical terms, but all of this can be explained rationally, we are told, and by those that will not accept this but that are still trapped within a reality that can only accept physical change and certain timelines as possible. Those people interject and try to neatly fit and work with notions that are not accepted by the rational majority but that, nevertheless, can help them explain in physical terms those things that modern archaeology is not willing to tackle, such as ancient megastructures, the ever-growing archaeological evidence that points to forms of advanced technology in the ancient past, and a large body of evidence that points to the fact that humanity is far older than is currently believed. And so ancient aliens are contemplated, and even pushing back on the actual age of humanity may sometimes be explored to some degree. Some might even begin to accept the fact that the movement and the tides of humanity as it goes from one type of polarity to another, might have a kind of cyclical pattern, but even this desire to expand ever still into more complex theories of human evolution and transmutation, become very difficult to ultimately explain for those that are trapped within 3 dimensions only, and the physical only. And having no access to perceptual mechanisms that are able to go beyond physicality, that is, only having access to the physical senses and perhaps not even believing that humanity can access different forms of perception beyond just those physical ones, then it becomes only natural, the only possible option, to go along with the flow of only what is possible within the range of such perceptions, even by those willing to look beyond the accepted beliefs of the times, and as such the only evidence acceptable is physical evidence, not seeing, not the perceptions possible with the inner senses. And that physical evidence must then be archaeology and the modern interpretation of ancient manuscripts that can still be found, that speak of odd and strange gods, gods that are now called ancient aliens by some, and the motivation of those gods or aliens that must only take the form of purely physical wants and needs, such as slave labor and the desire to mine precious metals, most specifically that most precious alchemical metal, gold. And such tomes, these old manuscripts from ancient civilizations say that there was a time when ancient gods, gods that came from the stars, came down and helped or subjugated humanity. Again, this is all neatly woven into the accepted historical timeline in accordance with the physical senses and the understood physical laws alone, and it is also assumed that these gods must have left and returned to the stars, being that with the physical senses, with the physical eyes they are no longer here. And yet in most of these ancient manuscripts the gods are not usually described as actually leaving at all, something that is perhaps overlooked by those trapped within physicality. But did those gods, or ancient aliens if you like, leave at all? According to the physical senses, yes, but the inner senses reveal a different truth. So, we have this physical evidence of ancient manuscripts such as the writings that might be found in Mesopotamia or Egypt, which can be taken seriously to some degree because it is physical evidence and that is all that matters to those that are trapped within physicality, all that is possible really. We have this general set of grimoire-like tomes by different cultures across the globe that in symbolic and seemingly at times quite literal terms perhaps, tell us that the gods came down from the sky, from the deep seas perhaps, which again are only explained and understood from physical terms, meaning the gods came from the sea, the earth ocean. But seldom is the thought that the symbolism might represent the great dark sea, the deep infinity and darkness of the multiverse all around us, because such seekers cannot or will not contemplate anything but what seems to be true and real from physical terms only. And being stuck in that point of perception only, the gods can be seen as symbols, but symbols of a certain type only, symbols that must only fit within three-dimensional existence, and the symbols might represent something akin to constellations or religious beliefs according to certain archaeological groups, while to other physically bound factions of a more speculative variety they might become ancient and quite physical humanoid aliens. So, following that general limited logic, these manuscripts from ancient cultures might mean a symbolic change in the beliefs of the theology of the times, to the general archaeological mainstream, or a physical tampering with human genetics perhaps by the more mentally adventurous few, that altered humanity, and that this altering had everything to do with physical, only physical, slave labor, and the need for physical gold or some other precious metal. But again, all must fit within the physical conception of things. But according to inner alchemists anyway, who are in essence alchemists, and who as a result have a great deal of experience and understanding in the use of symbols and ciphers and the use of other such styles of description, and who can be said to be deeply focused in the transmutation and the work with what could be described in a symbolic fashion or otherwise as gold, well, to them there is in those old mythological tales and poems, a hidden truth, a cipher within the cuneiform of those ancient clay tablets or papyrus scrolls, where gold has a different meaning, a different range of meaning anyway, where it can be both a kind of physical metal but also a symbol for an inner quality, an inner substance, so that when these ancients write about gold they may be speaking of the same gold that inner alchemists are talking about, when they speak about the supposedly physical substance, which in reality of course, at least in the way they mean it, is not truly physical at all. They are not talking about physical gold really. So that in both instances, inner alchemists and ancient manuscripts are not speaking of the metal per se as purely a metal, but that this precious substance referred to as gold is actually the final physical manifestation of something far more precious, something definitely far more difficult to find than just physical gold. To explain this further, and with the expanded understanding that we might have in this modern era, at least technologically speaking, certainly if an alien civilization, one that could move either through space or dimensions, which in the end is the same thing mind you, could if they desired gold, just physical gold and nothing else, they could, if they wanted to, as we now know, take their ships or whatever form of transportation they use, and go to one of the asteroids in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and there find all the gold they could ever desire. Psyche 16, for example, is just one asteroid that humanity has discovered within this region, and there is enough gold and precious metals in that one asteroid to make every single person on this planet a billionaire, being that there is an estimated $10,000 quadrillion worth of precious metals on just that one asteroid alone. Let that sink in for a moment. So why would ancient aliens want to come here for gold if there is so much more of it somewhere else? And of course, in near-zero gravity, mining that gold and other precious metals would potentially be far easier than doing it on the heavy, labor-intensive gravity of Earth. But what if gold is not just gold? What if the gold written about is not actually physical gold? What if, as when inner alchemists speak of gold, these ancient people were metaphorically speaking of something far more rare and far more pure than physical gold? What if these texts and manuscripts are speaking of inner alchemical gold, not the puffer's gold, not simply physical gold? What if, just like regular three-dimensionally bound alchemists, which inner alchemists call puffers because of their insistence on physical forges and chemistry, what if these modern three-dimensionally bound people, those that can only see what their physical senses tell them, what if they all have it wrong? What if the modern conceptions of gold and gods and stars and whatever else are wrong interpretations? What if what they are speaking about in these ancient tales is not physical gold but a kind of spiritual gold, true gold? To explain this, think about what it might be like to look at the Earth from very far away, far enough that it would seem like a distant moon in the darkness of outer space as you look at it. Physically, you would perceive with your physical eyes a blue and white sphere-like thing, and for the most part, there would be nothing special about it really. There are certainly planets of all sorts, and the Earth is not in that sense special. But if you could perceive with other senses, inner senses, if you could perceive energy directly as it flows in the cosmic space around you, you could then see, and as you do so, that distant sight of the Earth would be far different. There would be far more to distinguish this planet as special in relation to other heavenly bodies in its general vicinity. With regular physical eyes, the Earth is just one more thing floating in outer space, but through the power of the inner senses the Earth is gold. It is a brilliance that shines like a gold star in the relative darkness, a bright constant but flickering intensity amongst the endless dark ocean, that might swell and flow as the tides and the currents of the cosmos move ceaselessly across infinity. This dark ocean may swell with some lesser light, but nothing compares to the energy output of aware life that can access the intensity of biological organisms, that is awareness that is multidimensional, but that has this amazing power to also access a small band of reality called physicality in the form of organic life. And because of the power that we humans have to access organic existence, we the sentients of this planet, make this planet shine with a brilliance like nothing else around it. Due to our unique makeup, we human beings make this planet shine like a golden orb, a mesmerizing color like dazzling amber honey, in the middle of the great and for the most part dark cosmos. The Earth therefore is true gold, real gold, not the puffer's gold that can be found in many other planets and asteroids in the solar system, but a true rarity. And if you were an ancient alien civilization, and if such aliens could see using the inner senses, what they might be able to see would be gold, true amber gold, a real treasure, a far greater treasure than could be found anywhere else in this solar system anyway. So why us? Why here? Why did the Archon come here? From a purely physical perspective that must as a result be limited within the scope of its explanation to purely physical cause and effect relations and possible symbolism, then you could say something like, if ancient aliens did come here, then they did not come here for physical gold, they came for true gold, the true gold that is generated by, only by, a kind of highly intense awareness, an awareness that we human beings possess, especially as organic awareness, as aware entities that have a very special kind of energetic makeup that can access a biological body. And so, this planet glows like amber honey because it has on its surface a unique kind of awareness, the thinking aspect of the planet, and this awareness is highly unique in the cosmos because its intensity and the range of its operating dimensional frequencies means that it radiates a highly prized energetic glow, a kind of food energy if you will, that is rare, potent, and special. Gold may be relatively rare, but the glow of our kind of awareness is far rarer still, and for that energetic substance true effort could be made by an ancient alien race, gods from the stars or the deep seas, or by titans of unimaginable proportion and power, because such a resource is priceless and can be used in many different ways by those that are capable of such things. But it wasn't, in accordance to inner alchemists anyway, ancient aliens, or it would be better to say that it was not just physical aliens, but that it was a whole wave of action, both inner and outer, that like a complex ecosystem, begot a cascade of change that had many different components, some of which could be perceived as ancient alien-like, but that the true essence of all of this cyclic change was nevertheless at its foundation from an inner source, a current, most wanted and yet unexpected, that brought to this corner of the dark sea a dark cloud-like legion that I refer to as the Archon. The Archon came here for many reasons, many nuanced reasons that are hard to explain within the bounds of simplistic rationality, that is simple causal unorthodox logic, but you could say that in some ways the Archon was searching, is searching, endlessly, for that amber gold from specialized mass awareness like us, and that it is now its time, its cycle, and that there have been other cycles, and that there will continue to be different cycles as the tides of the Archon wax and wane. What is the most precious thing in the dark sea? As we look out into the cosmos, as we use our increasingly complex instruments to look into the relative darkness of infinity, and even though our understanding of energy is increasing, for the most part we humans are still on the whole stuck within object-like conclusions in this archonic high-tide cycle in our history. And with such eyes and with such a psychological disposition we may say that we are special in some ways, being that we can recognize that we are a relatively complex biological species, which is a truthful conclusion, but seldom do we appreciate the implications of this growing understanding, because it is so hard for us to conceive that there might be other life out there that defies any notion of physical and biological existence. And so, we just conclude that we are alone in the galaxy, really special we suppose, that our technology is what ultimately makes us special, and that through that technology we are developing the power to create anything we want. As our technology develops, we feel that it will be possible for us to go to an asteroid like Psyche 16, or anywhere else, get whatever we will need and create through our inventive but physicality-only focused technology anything we want. As the puffers of old have slowly turned themselves into the chemists, the physicists, and the engineers of this modern world, they have developed their techniques to the point that they can create just about anything, by transmuting in their puffer-like ways, using their chemistry and their forges, anything that we humans might ever want from a physical standpoint. This is a good thing for us generally, but a limit is being discovered to purely physical technology, and if this is not explored and tackled, it may stunt the evolution of the species, at the very least slow the human evolutionary process. But there is one thing that is very difficult to make in any physical forge, by any purely three-dimensional technology, one thing that is very difficult to find even in the vast cosmos, as the more pessimistic versions of the Drake equation tells us. And that most precious substance is the energetic brilliance, the gold, the honey-like gold and amber brilliance that is exuded by sentient biological awareness as it shines with great intensity, like a beacon in the dark night of the universe. The Archon came here for nuanced reasons, not the least of which was human intent, human desire, even if it was an unconscious one, an unconscious need for more self-awareness. But the reason that the Archon was pulled here, like a giant amoeba turning towards light and food, is because of the brilliance of that amber gold, and like a horde of locusts it descended and it takes and it causes change, and it is now a permanent component of the cyclical nature of human existence, which by the way as a species, humanity, is far older than the supposed few 100,000 years that are now accredited to it. There is an incredible array of awareness across the cosmos. This awareness is varied in size, shape, and complexity. Indeed, there are many types of awareness that are far more complex than human awareness, and some of this awareness can span across vast distances. But most of this awareness is non-organic, that is, this awareness is not awareness that is bound to or that has the possibility of accessing dimensional frequencies that can be termed physicality, biology. They cannot access a frequency where a biological body and the intensity of brilliance of that body is possible in three-dimensional like space, and being that their parameters of awareness are different, there is a different energetic quality to them. There is a backwards kind of containment to them that is hard to explain in rational terms. Through mere looking, the human rational world might imagine that biology somehow provides greater containment of living energy, being that through looking, biology seems hard, it seems object-like, bodies are in accordance to looking relatively hard and closed systems. But the energetic reality is a backwards one, at least for inner alchemists and those that can see. The brilliance of humanity is on the outside, while the brilliance of those vast inorganic other things, that other non-organic awareness, is inside, and for that reason their power is longer lasting, more calm, less intense, and it is better contained. As such, we humans glow, we are gold and we shine brightly, our brilliance is not contained, that makes us special, and unfortunately more easily manipulated and consumed. In the dark ocean we are light, we are like a golden glow. And if you have ever shone a light into a dark ocean, put out a bright light into the darkness of the open ocean at night, then you will know all too well that such a light attracts a great deal of attention, some of it curious, and some of it predatory. What is the gold more precious than physical gold, or any other physically perceived object? That gold is the amber gold of our biological awareness, the brilliance of our living biological light that becomes far more brilliant still when it is manipulated into being stuck within the lowest form of dimensional existence available to it, which is physicality, biology, and when that three-dimensionally trapped awareness, the thinking aspect of the nature of this planet, is pushed into experiencing one emotional impact after another. That is our fate, we are both the gold and the labor that some ancients wrote about. We have and are being manipulated, the ancient gods or aliens if you like that term, never left. There is a factor infinite and unknown, and all their words are skew-wise. As I have said, there is great nuance to the nature of this amber gold. There is nuance to the predation of the Archon and to how this gold, which can be molded into the philosopher's stone, can be used to allow us to begin to understand these mysteries, can allow us to fight back against this predation, and in its final form can allow us to even move beyond the walls of biology and three-dimensional objecthood forever. If you would like to know more about all of this, then I recommend my trilogy of course books mentioned at the start of the video, which I will leave a link to in the video description below.